What's up, everyone? Bringing you another video today. It's your boy Norin Rad. Today, a wrestling video. Today, we're going to be talking about, like, as you all know, if you're fans of the channel, I'm a wrestling fan since basically the age of 3 years old. I've been watching wrestling with my grandpa, going into watching it just as now as an adult, passing it on to my son and watching it with him and my daughters and stuff. So today, we're going to talk about, like I said, admittedly, I love wrestling. I'm going to continue being a fan, but there are some things that wrestling did get wrong. My least favorite ideas. Some things in this history that I just didn't like, or ideas that happened that I'm not comfortable with now. But this is also a video that could possibly get a part 2 because, like I said, we've had many decades of wrestling and they've made some very, very bad ideas, but these are some of just a small list of some that I think are my least favorite right now that kind of pertain almost to this generation of wrestling. So let's do this. Roll it. So as I said in my intro, admittedly, there are some things in wrestling that they've done or least favorite ideas that I have, and I'm totally opening this up for a part 2 because I noticed looking over this list that is mostly stuff pertaining to modern wrestling in the community right now, or just in general stuff that's happening in this current generation, that maybe I'll do one for the older generations and stuff like that and go through them, but also opening it up for doing some of my favorite ideas or favorite rankings of stuff they've done in wrestling. So like I said, let's kick this off right away. Some of my least favorite things, one thing I want to talk about right away is Money in the Bank. I've never been a huge fan of Money in the Bank, and this is something that did get brought up years and years ago, but I just can't stand that fact that it's become such a thing that it's just a routine, kind of like Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. It's every year we have a male and a female champion of Money in the Bank, and they have that briefcase and they hold it onto it. Don't get me wrong. There has been times where the cash-ins have been very entertaining. Damian Priest is one example. Seth Rollins is another example. So I think there can be moments where it is useful, but I feel like it should be sparingly. Money in the Bank should be something that's every other few years, not every year, and have it where you rotate it, where sometimes it's for the ladies, sometimes it's for the men, all that kind of stuff. That's something I would be more into, because just in terms of the idea, I can't stand the money in the briefcase thing. Even like with AEW, they've tried to do it a couple times with, especially Christian Cage having that contract for the AEW title. They had the poker chip thing that one time. So they've tried to recycle the idea and do it too, and I just don't think it's that worth it. Another thing is protection of signature moves. This has become a big problem recently. I've noticed this because when you watch wrestling in terms of the 80s and the 90s, it's clear cut. There are signature moves, there's finishers, and when those wrestlers lock in those submissions or they get those finishers off, it's pretty much over. And then over the years now, especially in the recent 2010s to 2020s, it's just there are no protected signature moves. One example is the super kick. This used to be the Sweet Chin Music. This used to be the Heartbreak Kid's finishing move. Now everybody does a super kick. It is literally just a basic move that every wrestler has now. The moonsault. The moonsault used to be a absolutely fantastic finishing move. Now it's done by everybody. Even a frog splash. Everybody has a frog splash in their repertoire, basically. So it's kind of crazy how now signature moves have very little protection. The only ones that I could think of off the top of my head are like Kazuchika Okada's Rainmaker and then Kenny Omega. Their finishing moves are the only ones that I could think of that are probably the most protected currently in modern wrestling. Next up, we have babysitting of titles. Don't you love when some of these wrestlers just win the titles and then they go months and months and weeks without fighting anybody? That's what I'm talking about. So long that sometimes we forget these titles even exist. That kind of goes hand in hand with another negative, is that there are too many titles in wrestling right now. I wish they could trim it down just a tiny bit. But yeah, in terms of babysitting titles, that's one of my least favorite things. When you have a title reign and it's like you go 3 months and you only have 2 title defenses, it just doesn't seem logical to me. I know that's more of like a boxing thing in UFC. That's more common in there because that's just a more physical sport and everything. But when it comes to wrestling, you want to have them be involved in storylines constantly. Someone trying to steal their title from them, or having them just hold the title and like cheating their way and scapegoating out of matches, stuff like that. There are creative ways to get these titles on screen and on television for us to feel for these champs and actually elevate these titles, because like I said, there are some titles like the trios title, like the continental title, like the international title. Sometimes we go weeks and weeks without having any storylines involved with these titles, or, like I said, matches that we kind of forget they even exist as fans. Next up, I want to talk about the WWE monopoly. This one kind of goes hand in hand with WWE purchasing AAA and having now a partnership with TNA, that it kind of feels like WWE is doing that thing that they did back in the day with WCW, where they just absorbed them into the company and just rebranded everything under the WWE banner. And I really hope that doesn't happen, because I've noticed that as a fan of wrestling over the decades, the greatest times for wrestling as wrestling fans and for wrestlers in general is when we have multiple promotions all across the world doing great things. I'm talking about, like I said, WWE, for example, AEW, New Japan Wrestling, Ring of Honor, TNA. When you have all these promotions going on and they're successful, and there's a place and an avenue for different wrestlers to travel to, like where it's like we get into this business and we can't make it with WWE, we're not going to make it anywhere because they own all the Mexico property or they own all the stuff over here. I don't want that to happen again, because as much as a fan I was of a kid when I was a child, and you heard WWE was purchasing WCW, and you were possibly going to get a chance to see Goldberg fight Stone Cold, or Sting fight Undertaker, or this or that wrestler fight another wrestler, it was such a dream match scenario. But when you think of it in long term, I don't think it was the best idea. Can you imagine a world where WWE purchased WCW and Vince just kind of let Shane or Stephanie go run WCW, but didn't absorb it into the WWE brand, and it still existed? Like, it would have been a totally different playing field. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of wrestling. I love the fact that we have multiple avenues and different territories and different promotions going on. And me, I'm a supporter of WWE, AEW. I try as much as I can to watch New Japan Wrestling. It just sucks because that's so much wrestling content, because I do cover horror movies and I love watching television shows and horror movies, that I do have to dedicate some time to that. So New Japan Wrestling is probably the third most one I watch. I don't watch Ring of Honor. I try to keep up on it news-wise by watching some wrestling channels like Wrestle Tati, a great wrestling channel. I highly recommend you all go over there and subscribe to her channel, because she covers a lot of cool wrestling content. And like I said, she always watches Ring of Honor, and that's one thing that I just don't have enough time for that. So I do dedicate time to WWE, AEW, and sometimes New Japan Wrestling, because me and my son are a huge fan of that too. So there's just so many avenues and so many places for wrestlers to go, and that's what I'm saying. This is the prime example of a great time for wrestling, and I don't want it to really change with WWE just purchasing up other companies and just, sucking them into the WWE brand. Now let's finish this one off with the last one right here. Like I said, this was just a short list. I'm still opening this up for a part 2. And also let me know down below in the comments section, what are some of your least favorite things about wrestling, and you're a wrestling fan. If it's just this generation or even other generations, past generations, what are some of your least favorite ideas that have happened? One thing I want to talk about right now, this is more of a fan thing. This is fan tribalism. This is a concept that I don't get at all. This kind of goes back to, why would you as wrestling fans just pick a promotion and just stick and fight to your guns about that one's the best? Screw AEW or screw Ring of Honor or F WWE. It's all about AEW. That's what I'm talking about. That tribalism that is kind of more created now on social media, mainly because of, Twitter and Facebook and just the way that people are on these social media sites. And it's just, they push that thing where it's like, you have to support one brand and not the other. You have to fight for the right to, WWE is the best and AEW must fall. It's like, I don't get that concept. I'm a huge wrestling fan. Like I said, I love the fact that there's so much wrestling going on right now that I have a hard time figuring out when I'm going to fit it all in. That's how much good wrestling is going on right now in the time we're living, is because there's so many hours in a day and you can only fit in so much. But that's what I'm talking about. Why be a tribalist and just support one type of brand when WWE offers something completely different from AEW? AEW is finding their own niche and creating these new wrestling style matches and going more for the old gritty kind of mid-90s aggression style, attitude era stuff. Then you have New Japan Wrestling, which is strong style, and it's more just fan-loving based stuff. And there's some crazy storylines going on out there that, why would you want them to fail? Why would you not want different brands? You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant, you want different variety of food, right? You do want burgers, you want steak, sometimes you want to crave chicken. That's kind of how it is with these wrestling promotions. There's different ones out there that offer you a different flavor, and as a wrestling fan, why would you want them to fail? It just never I never could understand that concept. But this is just a list of my thoughts and my least favorite ideas. Some of them in wrestling, like I said, we're going to do a part 2 to this video. But also I want to do a video talking about some of my favorite ideas and things I love about wrestling. Because like I said, being a wrestling fan for decades and decades, they've made many successes. They've made awesome ideas and came up with some cool entertainment stuff. But there's also some really bad ideas out there that wrestling has had. And like I said, maybe I'll tackle the older generations next on my other list, where I go back to, you know, the 90s or the 80s and 70s and kind of talk about negatives from those generations. I would love to do that, but please let me know down below in the comment section, what are your thoughts on this video? Like, subscribe, all that jazz. That definitely helps out the channel, but most importantly, y'all know what's up. Have a safe and happy day. Peace out.